that germ theory is unproven. And of course, we went over that with Dr. Kaufman. But all right, let's hear what your take on it, folks.
Okay. Well, without wanting to sort of bore people if they've heard a lot of this before, just
they need to hear it. They need to hear a lot of it.
Okay. Brief history is most of it is attributed to Louis Pasteur. So we're looking at about 150 years ago. Most people may not realize that Louis Pasteur was a chemist, so there's a bit of a clue there as to where we are with things today. But he's sort of credited with the sort of generation of the germ theory. In actual fact, it does go back a bit further than that. But obviously, it was seized upon at the time. They could only see bacteria through there. They only had optical microscopes, and the only things they could see were bacteria, although tiny, but that's what they could see. And so they were starting to blame bacteria for quite a number of illnesses. And as we explain in the book, again giving a short explanation here, what we found is that what they were looking at, so if they, through their microscope, looked at some diseased tissue or some dying cells, they would see clusters of bacteria around those cells. And they then made the big mistake of blaming the bacteria for the cause of the dying cells. What they didn't realize at the time is that bacteria in the body in that way are actually a cleanup mechanism. That's their job. It's the same sort of thing that you see as you walk in forests and things. You'll see decaying trees or being taken over by fungi, which is another thing that can happen in the body. And this is their job. They are cleanup agents. Without them, human life, any life, would cease to exist if you didn't have that cleanup mechanism. But that was the root of it. They mistakenly thought that they were the cause. And we often say to people, that would be just akin to just because whenever you see a house fire, you see firemen clustered around it. So you blame the firemen for causing the fire rather than the ones who are trying to help and put it out. And so that's how bacteria got a bad name. But to look at the actual science, again, there is no proof that any particular bacteria causes any particular disease. Yes, you'll find them at the sites of disease, but they're there for a very good reason. Okay. So in later years, in around about the 1930s, when the electron microscope was sort of invented, they were able to see much smaller particles then because they realized that they couldn't blame bacteria for every type of disease that they'd come across, but now they could see something else. They could see even tinier particles than bacteria in the blood. So they started to blame these particles for it, which got the name of virus. Again, we explain where that comes from, the name, what its original meaning was. But anyway, they started to blame these other particles for it. Even though, as we know, viruses, the things that they call viruses, are just actual tiny particles of protein. They're not alive. They are not living organisms. There are certain things, even within scientific terms, there are certain things that determine whether something is alive. And that is that they have to be able to eat and excrete and reproduce and have a certain minimum DNA. Well, these things that are called viruses don't have any of those things. So they're basically not alive. They're completely inert. And yet, the medical establishment blamed them for almost everything. And again, this will ring true with people, again, with the stuff that's going off in the world today.
So wait a minute here, David. I'm sorry to interrupt, but every evening on the news, they show me a picture of a coronavirus.
Yeah.
Dr. Kaufman was generous enough with his well-researched information to inform us that that was an artist's rendering of a thing that has no existence in reality. From your point of view, what the hell is that thing they're showing us every night on the evening news called the coronavirus? What is that?
Exactly.
They're
Exactly.
CGI images.
The CGI images, because one of the things, which of course they never tell you, is any of these images through an electron microscope will be flat and only black and white, and certainly not moving. And yet we get these wonderful things in almost 3D, full color, and we get lots of different pictures, of course, of the same virus, which is a bit of an anomaly. But yeah, they're pure CGI. And I would challenge any of them to say, no, these are genuine pictures of the virus. They are absolutely not. And it's just a con trick, really, to because people don't question it and they think they're actually seeing a virus. This is it. This is the thing. Not true.
So let me jump in here to make a self-serving point, but it's not really self-serving because it serves us all to understand that we just had two professionals back to back. The first one, an MD and a psychologist, trained about as much as a medical person can be trained in the United States, who came and said the exact same thing about viruses. So for all the people who want to be afraid of a thing right now, you're going to have to look for something else, because what we've told you is verifiable. It's well cited. And by the way, if you get the book, you'll find out that these authors basically have also cited all their work so that it can be verified.
Can I say there's another scientist and as a biologist, Dr. Lynn Margulis, who died a number of years ago. She states quite clearly that viruses are no more germs and enemies than are bacteria or human cells. So, that's a biologist saying it very, very clearly. So, these are not isolated cases. It's not just an odd doctor here and there. The more we looked, the more we found that people are saying, there are some who have written and explained that, there's no proof that they cause disease. They're not the enemy.
This would be a good place for people to pause momentarily and bring up a search engine and look up the word hoodwink, by the way. But anyhow, Jason, over to you.
Hoodwink indeed.
Hoodwink indeed.
So we've gone through quite a few of these. Did you want to address anything else with viruses, since these kind of go together?
On the germ theory, again, people say, oh, well, where's the evidence? Or they've been saying that it's been proven. There were, it's not just a recent thing that people have been saying, oh, no, it's not proven. There were people who were not exactly contemporaries of Pasteur exactly, but in the early 20th century, we cite doctors who say literally that, there's no evidence. There is, and they say that they're quite prepared to state that there is no scientifically established evidence to prove that any microorganism causes any disease. So that was the case, in 1911 and 1928, which are two particular quotes we've got, that if the evidence wasn't there then nothing's changed to make it now, to make it so. It's just, it never was there.
Let me just, we say this in the book for anyone who'd like to write this down or challenge the medical establishment, which we have. And we say in the book, if anyone is claiming that a particular virus is the cause of a disease, then ask them for the proof. And I would recommend them to ask these three questions. Is there an electron micrograph of the pure and fully characterized virus? What is the name of the primary specialist peer-reviewed paper in which the virus is illustrated and its full genetic information described? And what is the name of the primary publication that provides proof that a particular virus is the sole cause of a particular disease? Now, we've put this in our book and our first little book that we did, and challenged anyone, doctors, anyone they like, to answer those questions and prove us wrong. And no one ever has. So I would recommend that people bear those three little questions in mind and ask them of anyone, any doctor, anyone at all who is trying to propose that we have a viral infection on our hands, and ask those three questions. And if they can't provide the answers to those three questions, then you have your answer.
So, Jason, are you noticing the commonality between Dr. Andrew Kaufman and our current guests with the fact that research should be reproducible? They've verbatim went back to the same root areas like Pasteur. And one of the guests took the time to show that Pasteur was actually plagiarizing other people. They both went to the micrographs. They both said the exact same thing about viruses. I'm just pointing out that research should be reproducible. And we're showing you right here that the last two guests are so well researched, and they are telling you basically verbatim the same sources, where it started and what we know now. Why don't you go ahead and carry us? I guess we're on the last point for hour one, but we'll carry it forward.
Well, there's one last thing I'd like to address about viruses that I know is going to probably crop up in some folks' mind. If you do a search for a picture of a virus, the only thing you can find that's supposed to be real pictures are indeed these black and white images. And they don't really look very much like all of the other pretty pictures that, as we said, are CGI. What's pushed out there and said this is a virus. So what have you come across, in your opinion, what do you think a virus really is?
Basically, they're just little bits of protein. And no one, and I repeat, no one actually knows what they do in reality. They're just in the blood and they don't do anything, basically. So it could actually be cell debris. They are certainly not pathogens. And that's really the main point of all this. They're not pathogens, so they don't cause disease. Yes, they exist, but they're tiny, as much as anyone can say, tiny bits of protein.
I want to get this last point in. We're gonna be wrapping up hour one in a minute. Please give us the definition. We always say in the work Jason and I do that words have meaning. Can you tell us the roots of the word virus, what it means, and just cover the word a little bit real quickly again?
Yeah, the word virus comes from Latin, and it means poison or noxious substance. And we show quite clearly in the book that some of the older writings before the end of the 19th century, when they used the word virus, they were using it in that context. And we might go into a bit more detail as to what that word was applied to a bit later, because what they were describing was certainly noxious substances that's nothing to do with a particular particle.
Okay, so before we take on the German court case, and I'll let Jason add what he will and lead us in hour two, there's going to be some things that we bring up that people are going to have an interest in. HIV, AIDS, the immune system, bacteria, the plague, the Black Death, malaria. These are all big ideas. But Jason, let's try to maximize out the tail end of what we've got for hour one here with whatever you'll add.
So we're going to talk about Stephen Lanka next, and he is a German biologist who's accused of having pseudo-scientific outbursts. But let's hear what you've got to say about this gentleman.
Well, I think to prove and vindicate Dr. Stephen Lanka, bearing in mind he was a trained virologist, whatever anyone may think, he took the case to court and challenged the medical establishment to actually prove that there was a virus that caused measles, okay? And they were unable to do so, in short. They had a couple of goes at it, but they were unable to prove by bringing all the scientific papers that they said did prove it, but in a German court, that evidence was seen to not prove that a virus caused measles. Now, you would have thought that that would have made world headlines, wouldn't you? All around the world, even if that was the only virus that they'd found not to cause a disease. But no, it was the mainstream was sort of silent about it, and it makes you wonder why. Well, we know why, because it's a controlled medium by the same people making all the money. And Dr. Lanka is the one who, again, publicly has said he's not found any virus to be the cause of any disease, but he was able to prove in court, even though they threw their best people at it, the pharmaceutical companies that is, they couldn't prove it in a German court, so this is not some sort of kangaroo court in the backwoods. This is a German court of law, and they could not prove that a virus caused measles, which of course begs the question then, is what are vaccinations for measles about? And I guess we're going to be talking about vaccinations in hour two. But I think that one thing vindicates everything we've been saying. One is that one of the things that parents are very fearful of, their children getting measles, and the media and the medical system are trying to frighten them into getting their childs vaccinated. And yet they know very well that it has been proven in a German court that there is no virus that causes measles, in which case it begs the question, what is the vaccination for?